Just introduce our candidates. As you may have remembered from previous week, what I said is the assembly person who represents Berkeley is termed out, Nancy Skinner. So we will have a new assembly member representing Berkeley this fall. And the four top candidates are here today to talk to you, so you can decide who you want to vote for, who you want to work for, and get involved in the campaign. And they are, in alphabetical order, Elizabeth Eccles right here. Sam Kang right here. Andy Katz. And where is Tony? Okay, Tony in the bathroom. So, Tony Thurman, by the way. We just did an elaborate process to determine the speaking order, and we have come up with one. Each candidate will speak to you for 8 minutes. Okay, thanks. And I will watch that, and then we will open it up for your questions. So, the first speaker today is going to be, I've already forgotten, Andy Katz, right here. Okay? They will tell you about their background themselves to save time.
Hi, good afternoon. And they didn't tell us that we would be speaking without a microphone, but I think it's just as well. Can everybody hear me okay in the back?
Mouth isn't big enough, but we're going to use the mic. It's because of those experiences that I stand before you, and I spent 8 years elected as a city council person. I then went on to be elected as a school board member in the West Contra Costa School Board District, which is not very far from here. But it was experiences like student activism that got me started and have given me a chance to be running for the state assembly and the chance to represent you and the many people around this district. So I went from being a social worker to becoming a city council person. We literally created hundreds of jobs and started a job training program that focuses on solar panel installation. We put young people to work. I became a school board member, and we rebuilt every single school in our district, and we reduced our suspension rate by 27%. And you might say, well, why is that important? Because when kids get pushed out of class, they can't learn and they can't graduate. So I'm running on a heavy platform of education, protecting the environment, healthcare. We literally put a health center in all of our high schools because in many of these communities we see the kind of economic disparity that make it impossible to get proper healthcare. We built a state-of-the-art dental clinic in one of our elementary schools that has one of the highest rates of poverty. And even though we have the Affordable Care Act, as an assembly person, I'll be pushing to create this type of system that's called a single-payer healthcare system, because I believe we have to put patients ahead of profits. Right now, we've got lots of hospital systems that are making so much money. Their executives are making millions just in their bonuses, while people who live in our communities cannot see a doctor for years and cannot have the care that they need. And I'll be fighting hard to change our tax structure, because right now the largest corporations in the world pay pennies just so that they can say that they're in our communities, while we have a structural deficit and we can't fund higher education, we can't fund healthcare. So I ask you, no matter what you do, get involved. But I'd be honored if you go to tonythurman.com and join our campaign today, make a difference in this district and make a difference in the world. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, and now we will hear from Elizabeth Eccles, and then we'll take your questions.
Thank you, Professor Ross, for having us here today, and thanks to all of you for being here. I grew up here in Berkeley. My name's Elizabeth Eccles, and I'm running for the State Assembly for 3 reasons. I want to expand educational opportunity, I want to create more good quality jobs, and I want to protect and preserve our environment. When I was a child in growing up here in this town, my mom was a single mom with 4 kids, and she struggled to make ends meet. She went back to school to get her teacher's credential, actually here at Cal, when I was about 12 years old, and was going to school full-time and working part-time to support 4 kids. When she graduated, there were no teaching jobs available because there was a hiring freeze on in the public schools. So instead of being discouraged, she saw a different opportunity. She had a vision of creating, making science education really exciting for young kids by creating art and creative dramatics as part of the science curriculum. So she went and knocked on Lawrence Hall's door and got an opportunity to teach one small class, which over time she created the early childhood biology program at Lawrence Hall of Science. And for me, watching her first struggle and then have this opportunity to get a good education here at Cal and then make a contribution in terms of science education was very inspiring to me as a child. And so I learned early the value of hard work and a public school education. I went all the way through the Berkeley schools, graduated from Berkeley High. I then attended college on scholarship and also helped pay my expenses by washing dishes and cleaning dorm rooms. And then was lucky enough to attend law school on, well, through loans and through putting myself through with various jobs. So after all that, I was fortunate to have an opportunity early in my career to work for President Clinton in the White House. And at that time, this is, in the mid-90s when most people didn't have internet yet. And it's kind of hard to imagine that now, that most people didn't have email. It's kind of crazy to think about. But at that time, there was a real concern about the digital divide. And that means people, not everyone, having access to the internet and the benefits that the internet could bring. So we worked a lot on that issue. And then when I left the White House, it was very clear to me that it was one thing getting people connected up to the internet. That was a good first step. But what we really needed to do was to have everyone have the opportunity to get access to the potential economic opportunity that could come from the internet. And so I moved back to the Bay Area and headed a nonprofit organization called OpNet, where we trained low-income young adults on web design and web programming and helped them get good jobs in the tech industry. We placed about 80% of our students. We also worked with students in the juvenile justice system and helped them transition out of the juvenile justice system into getting good skills so that they could have a second chance at a good career or good job skills. After spending a number of years at OpNet, I went to, which was then a relatively small company called Google, and I was attracted to Google really by their mission, which is to organize the world's information and make it accessible to everyone. I saw the power of the internet to provide economic opportunity, particularly for our small businesses and entrepreneurs that for the first time could really have a global platform for their sales without with only very little expense. So that was the appeal there. In fact, while I was at Google, Al Gore came to visit, and he did a PowerPoint on Inconvenient Truth. This is before the movie came out, and that was a while ago, so I don't know how many of you saw the movie. But he came and did his PowerPoint, and that re-inspired me to take the skills that I had and apply them to the environment. And so I went and worked for the U.S. Green Building Council and worked to pass a legislation that would both protect the environment and create green jobs. And I did that for a number of years before getting appointed to the Small Business Administration as President Obama's appointee. And at the Small Business Administration, my focus was on our underserved communities and youth and trying to connect people up with the resources that the Small Business Administration had. So things like access to capital. If you want to start a small business, you're going to need some capital. Also, we trained people on how to do a good business plan, how to market their products on the web. You name it, the Small Business Administration could help. And my region led the country in the amount of capital we were able to get out to people. We provided $12 billion worth of loans to about 28,000 small businesses. And then just this past, little less than a year ago, this past April, I stepped down from that position so I could run for the Assembly. And again, I'm running for the Assembly to provide to expand educational opportunity, to create good jobs, and to protect the environment. And I don't want to repeat what a lot of my opponents have already said, but really education, of course, you're sitting in this audience. You've got to have a good education to get out there and be successful in this world, especially in this day and age. And so many people are not able to have access to that. When I graduated from Berkeley High School, so many of my classmates came here to the UC or another UC or community colleges. Community colleges were virtually free at that point, and things have changed so dramatically. Same thing with K through 12. Our schools were just incredible in terms of the courses offered and the art and creative dramatics and everything else that you can imagine. And so I'm really committed to reinvesting in our public schools and also in our state universities and colleges and making schools affordable and accessible to everybody. I also am committed to continuing to create good quality jobs. And for those of you who are budding entrepreneurs out there in the audience, it's important to have support for folks like you who can create the jobs of the future and can solve the problems of the future too, because now with climate change we have real challenges, and so all of us have to put our minds to how can we solve this, what can we do to help. And finally, on the environment, when I was at the U.S. Green Building Council, I put those coalitions together with industry, with labor groups, with environmental groups to not only pass legislation, but we also work to strengthen our green building codes, because as you may know, buildings create about 40% of our greenhouse gases, so that's an area that we really have to focus on. And when I was working with those coalitions, there were times when even our environmental allies said, okay, we've got enough. We've got enough concessions. We're good, we can declare victory and go home. And I said, no, you can't. We can do better. And so I kept pushing until we got to a place where I felt we could be really proud of our accomplishments. And that's what I intend to do when I'm in the Assembly. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep pushing. This district has a long history of electing progressive leaders. Nancy Skinner, who's currently in the seat, has endorsed me. Senator Lonnie Hancock, who previously held the seat, has also endorsed me. And I would be truly honored to continue to carry that banner to Sacramento. And I hope to have your support in that. You can find me on the web at www.ecclesforassembly.com. That's for F-O-R spelled out, ecclesforassembly.com. I also have some information with me, so you can come up and see me afterwards. And if you'd like to come to an event we have coming up with Senator Lonnie Hancock and Nancy Skinner, we're looking for volunteers, and then you could attend as my guest. So please see me afterwards if you're interested. Thanks so much.
Okay, all the candidates will come up. If you have questions, hopefully for everyone as opposed to one particular candidate, let's open it for questions, short answers, so we can get several in. Start with someone be the first question today. There we go, right there.
So you all mentioned the environment, but more very specific, what's one specific thing you work on?
Can you repeat the question?
So thank you for the question about what will we do to improve the environment. There are many, so fortunately a lot of companies have gotten on board and are doing the right thing, but there are many companies that continue to pollute our environment. So I'd pass some of the strictest laws to really find those companies that harm the environment. I'd also like to direct the state's resources to really fund more job opportunities that focus on clean tech and alternative energy opportunities. We know that we've got to really bear down to do more. We are being bombarded every day with people who want to use technology like fracking that we know is having a negative impact on our communities and our coastline. So I would direct the state's resources to promote more research into job opportunities in the clean tech sector, so we get a twofer, right? We create clean opportunities and clean energy opportunities, and we create great paying jobs for our students and for our young people and for people who are going to work in the California economy.
So there are two things that I would propose doing with the environment right now. One I've already done. So before I get to that, let me answer it more directly. It's okay. I don't need it.
That way it goes on the internet.
Oh, it's okay. So there are two things that I would do. One I've already completed, it's in the implementation stage. One is with the environmentalism movement, we play too much defense. Look at how we even label the term environmental protection. What we got to do to prevent oil companies from taking over and creating policy and prevent them from steamrolling us is to play more offense. Okay? Instead of saying environmental protection, let's bring in environmental promotion. Okay? And really highlight the ways the economy is benefiting in the 21st century from pushing pro-environmental policies. Here's a stark example. So 2 years ago, I wrote a piece of legislation called SB 535. So it was signed into law by the governor last year, and here's what it did. AB 32, about 10, 11, 12 years ago, created a cap-and-trade system here in California. And what that does is it fines large polluters all over California for the pollution they put in the air. Great bill. But we don't know how all that money is going to be allocated. SB 535 mandated that 10 to 25% of all those cap-and-trade revenues would go directly into the communities that were most impacted by pollution. We passed that bill, got signed into law, is being implemented as we speak. It means hundreds of millions of dollars going directly into the communities to benefit environmental movement.
It's hard to pick just one. I'm proud to be the environmental candidate in this race. I'm endorsed by the Sierra Club because I've worked as a professional environmentalist for the last 8 years, working on climate change, protecting our environment, protecting the air we breathe. Before that, my very first campaign was while a student at Cal, passing the urban limit line in Alameda County, Measure D in 2000. And so I will work to ensure that we have public transit that works for all of us, adequate public transit funding so that we can expand our system and ensure that we can all have access to get around without just using a car. I will work to ensure that we have zero waste, that we get to a place in our packaging and our environment where we aren't contributing to growing landfills. Ensuring our water supply sustainability. We are facing the most critical drought year in California's history. We need to make sure that we can use water sustainably statewide so that we don't destroy the Delta, which is the most precious estuary in the entire West Coast. We need to ensure that we protect our climate for our future generations. And that's why I've worked to pass and implement AB 32, California's landmark climate law, that reduces greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels by 2020. But it's not enough to stop with that. We need to make sure that we get to the real reductions we need in the decades to come. I will work in the legislature to ensure that we have a target that goes beyond 2020, to make sure that our cap and trade system and other regulations that help ensure that we get our energy from clean sources, that we improve our building quality so that we have energy efficient buildings, and that we're ensuring that our transportation sector makes the transition to electric vehicles and to public transit. So I will work very hard to make sure that we have climate protection and that California isn't just doing our own program, but that we actually connect with other states and move the rest of the country to do the same kinds of actions that we are.
Thanks for the question. My number one issue that I want to do immediately is to put a full moratorium on fracking. We don't know the impact that it can have on seismic activity. We know that it's putting toxins in our water, and there are a whole host of environmental reasons why fracking is a bad thing. So if you want just one, that's the first one on my list. But since the others mentioned a few others, I'm going to very quickly say there's a lot that we need to do. I mentioned green buildings earlier and the fact that they're 40% of greenhouse gases. In this last election cycle, we were able to close some corporate loopholes and get money that we're now putting towards our schools to make those facilities greener. So I want to look for other opportunities like that to green our state's building stock. It's a great opportunity to both improve our environment and create good jobs. In addition to that, it's important to look at all ways to solve these problems. So we need to support those folks who are doing research on clean, new green materials and alternative forms of energy, and that's another way that I'd like to see our state's resources put to.
Thank you. Let's see, all the way in the back. Go ahead. Loud. You all support it? Okay, everyone says yes. Everyone supports single payer. All right, go ahead. Say it again.
It's a great question. I think what that's going to come down to is how the type of assembly member that we're going to be. And in my case, the experience that I've had is going to make me go to Sacramento and be a leader right off the bat. I've worked for 2 presidents. I've run 2 different nonprofits. I've worked in the private sector. I know how to get things done. And I know how to build the coalitions that are needed to pass legislation effectively. And I think that's really what sets us apart. The different ways that I've worked with government and government programs has allowed me to figure out how to get government to work for the people that it serves. Thanks.
What sets me apart is a record of activism from the moment I got to this campus to this day. From the moment I got to this campus, I recognized the inequities that we had with the housing crisis that we faced at the time that went away for a short period during the recession and we're seeing again. I worked to build thousands of units that support affordable student housing. worked to pass the class pass here. That kind of activism, I think, is something that drove me to start my career as an affordable housing developer, to work for Alameda County Supervisor Keith Carson and work on issues around recidivism and ensuring an equitable society. And that's why I've spent the last 8 years working as an advocate in the Capitol, working on legislation to be able to ensure that we have a clean environment, accessible health care, and that we protect kids from tobacco addiction. So those are the issues that I've worked on. I have the experience from being an advocate in Sacramento, reading laws, making edits, and being able to pass good bills and block bad bills in the Capitol. So I have that kind of legislative experience fighting for our district. I'm also an elected official, and I've served for 8 years on the East Bay Mud Board of Directors, making sure that our communities are able to weather the storm against the drought, and I have that experience in local government.
So I'll bring up a couple of things. One is doing the job of not just passing bills, but knowing how to leverage bills for good outcomes. So I'll give you one example. So PG&E, after the whole San Bruno disaster, that was awful. And there were all kinds of legislators who were throwing all kinds of bills at PG&E. Very few of them actually passed because that's how powerful PG&E is. So with all these bills going on, I actually went to their CEO and said, you know, let's try to find something to do together. One thing you can do is communicate with your customers better. Job number one, that's where you start. I thought that was a practical way to go about things, but I went for the Holy Grail. I wanted to fix their bills, okay? And the bills for any utility company, that's their Holy Grail. They don't want that messed with because guess what? That's how they communicate with every single customer. Here's what I wanted from them. Here's what you can do, is it's something revolutionary, is translate the bill. Offer it in different languages. They said, no, we're absolutely not going to do that. But I persisted. We negotiated over 8 months, and now PG&E has become the only utility in the state, perhaps in the country, to offer its bills in Chinese and Spanish. That was done without legislation. That was done by leveraging what was going on in Sacramento to provide a positive outcome. Second way I can distinguish myself is the following, is I know exactly what it is to be in your shoes because it hasn't been that too far along since I was in the seats that you're sitting in. I am still paying student loans. I will be paying student loans for a good long while. So your interest, believe me, I feel your pain.
I appeal to you to consider experience. And so for nearly 8 years, as a school board member, as a city council person, dealing with the very broad issues that this district faces. It's an amazing diversity in this district. You know, everything from environmental issues to education to creating jobs to reducing crime and violence. And I've had to lead on all of these issues as a city council person and as a school board member. Local government often does prepare you when you're in tough decision-making situations, helps to prepare you for the fights that you will have in Sacramento. As you all know, Sacramento is full with lobbyists who, until recently, pretty much ran the Capitol. Because the way our laws were written, you really didn't get more than 6 years to be in Sacramento. So the lobbyists really had a chance to sort of influence everything and really get their way and get things passed. You know, I'll give you an example. The first night that I was sworn in on the school board, I literally had not put my hand down yet, and I was asked in that very moment to close 10 schools. And they said, we're going to ask you to do this. We know it's bad for kids, and we're going to ask you to do it anyway. And I said to them, hell no. If it's bad for kids, then it's not the right thing to do. Because I believe if you have the political will to do the right thing, you find the resources to get the job done. In our school district, there are 5 city governments. And because I'd been a city council member and I knew them all, I called every single one of them. And for the first time ever, we had a joint meeting of the school board in all 5 city councils. And they put up millions of dollars to keep 5 of those schools open. They were high-performing schools in low-income communities, and all those kids deserve to have a chance to have a great education. When I voted to stop Chevron from processing those dirtier crudes, I got threats. I was called a job killer. I was told I didn't care about my community. I said, I make decisions in a way that would make my kids proud, and they deserve to breathe healthy air. And I've been fighting for them, and I'm going to fight for you as your assembly person. Thanks for the question.
All right, thank you to all 4 of our candidates. Please come up and meet them, get involved in the campaigns. I'll see you all next week. Thank you.